I'm going to be talking the next 30 minutes about what are the challenges I see, what are the patterns that I've seen over the past several years with respect to uh, people not being able to adopt the kind of capabilities that we build. So just to introduce myself, I'm Ajay. I have been in the industry for about 30 plus years, doing all kinds of things that you can imagine within the software and product development. Currently, I work for a company called Brillio, where I'm actually focusing on building platforms and products. So let's actually jump into this, right? So first thing when I'm thinking about is that we are having a lot of momentum within the whole platform engineering space, right? I mean, so um, for those of you, I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with the whole concept of platform engineering, so I'm not going to go into all of that. But as you really think of SREs, or if you think of developer experience or DevOps, each of those terms are in that particular order. I see like has got a lot of relationship to platform engineering, because the way I see it is that platform engineering is in that center of providing the SRE capabilities. It sort of enables that SRE. And it also enables the developer experience. In order for you to have the best developer experience, we know that engineering platforms are what's actually driving that. And in order for you to sort of achieve that DevOps culture, you are obviously need to have the right kind of tools and the capabilities coming out of platform engineering. So then, at least the past few years, we have talked a lot about platform as a product, right? How has that been different from DevOps? Yeah, we know it is the reason why it is different, and how it's different is that, yeah, we need to really look at this automation as a product and how that sort of works. And in that space, we have already started talking a lot about the internal developer platforms as well as developer portals, right? I mean, so when I think of developer platforms, I'm thinking of tools like Humanitech or any of the other orchestration platforms and things like that you might build using any technology. And when I'm talking about portals, I'm thinking of things like Backstage or Cortex or any of the other off-the-shelf, solutions that are available. So if you look at the industry, you all have seen this, right? I mean, if you look at any kind of industry analysis or anything, you see that about 80% of the digital organizations are going towards some level of platform engineering investment. They are making sure that, hey, this is a huge thing for them to invest in. This meaning that, building engineering platform or that platform engineering mindset. And the way they are doing it is using an internal developer platform with some kind of a developer portal front end. So this is something that has been proved, and there's enough data that is there. So you can see that this is huge. It's so pervasive across every industry. But what is stopping that adoption, right? Because now in my current job, as well as my previous job and all that, I've been working with clients in pretty much every industry that you can think of. If you think about the kind of domains that you are all working on, whether it is banking, financial services, whether it is healthcare, whether it is technology, whether it is manufacturing, or whether it is any or telco, any of the kind of industry verticals, everybody is having this common problem of you're building it and things aren't really getting adopted at the level in which you expect it to. This is not a problem just from the point of view of an engineering platform, because earlier today, actually, I was talking to a bunch of my clients who are having similar problems with things like Copilot. They have a lot of Copilot licenses. Yeah, they have this adoption problem. So this adoption problem is a classic problem that I don't think any of us have completely solved it, but this is something that I'm going to talk about today. So now let's take a step back, right? So you built it thinking that they would come, or I'm sure I'm not saying that all of you did it, but let's assume that you built it thinking that they'd come. But unfortunately, they didn't. Why didn't they come, right? Multiple reasons. Number one reason in my mind is that complexity. The whole idea of you built a platform was essentially to reduce that complexity, reduce the cognitive load of the developers. And you're really thinking that as you really start building these capabilities, developers don't have to learn a lot of new things. They can reduce the complexity. But in the process of doing it, you created some additional levels of complexity, right? So that is one thing. Second thing is lack of visibility. We'll talk a lot about that today, right? So lack of visibility has always been a problem. We'll unpack that a little bit more to understand what that means. And then the high cost to build. Anytime you actually take a proposal for building an engineering platform or setting up a platform engineering team to your leadership, one of the things that's going to come up is like, how much is that going to cost? Is that really going to give me a payback, right? So there are a lot of work that is being done in the industry. And if you really look at the platform engineering blogs, also you'll find a lot of different articles on that. how do you actually measure that and making sure that you get the right kind of ROI? So maybe that ROI isn't there. That's the reason why there's not higher adoption. The last one, you can't, basically deprioritize that. That's the NIMBY attitude, right? I mean, so not in my backyard kind of thing. Essentially like, hey, uh, I know what I'm doing best. I'm solving this problem. Who are you to come in and tell me what to do, right? I mean, this is something that we hear all the time. So there are different patterns within that we'll talk about. So now the question is like, when somebody came in with all those arguments, did you talk about all the benefits, right? I'm pretty sure you have, right? So it's a question of, you're talking about, hey, if you use the platform, you can create more standardization and scalability. You can create more security out of the box. You can make things a lot more consistent and eventually improves your productivity. You can take all the data that is coming out of the platform engineering report or the DORA report and all that kind of things. And you can say, okay, here is all the data that's showing that business would get better if you were to use these kinds of things. But despite doing all of that, you still are struggling with the whole adoption problem. So in really looking at the industry, these are sort of the 7 different systemic resistance patterns that I've seen. I'm sure you would have seen others too, but I would probably venture an argument that maybe we could just put all those things into a manageable set of resistance patterns. But it's good to spend a couple of minutes on these resistance patterns, right? Just read through that and see if any of these things resonate with you, right? So people might say, hey, we have always done it one way. That works. Why should I change? Because I'm getting my outcome. The other thing is that, yeah, this might be good for other teams, not for me, right? I mean, I'm good with whatever is there. Then as you're dealing with a lot of software engineers, one thing that you would find is that the product developers, we are all proud of our capabilities and what we bring to the table. So if you are building something, why can't I build it? Maybe I already built one. So I got my stuff working. I don't know why you should use yours. The visibility problem, the metrics problem is huge, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that is being done on the software engineering intelligence side of things, not just from your product point of view, but also from the platform's point of view, where there has to be much better understanding of what problem are you solving. Because if you don't know what problem you're solving, you're not really going to solve it right. Then the lack of product mindset has been also a challenge, right? I mean, so people think of it like, yeah, it's just another DevOps project, which is also a misnomer to start with. We think of DevOps as a culture as opposed to a project kind of an activity. But think of it like, yeah, I did some automation. I got my bills working. I got my pipelines working. So and I shipped my product. Yeah, I'm done. So why do you make it a bigger deal than it is, right? Then ownership is always a problem. So the question is like, whose job is to drive this adoption? Is it the job of the engineering teams, or is it the job of the platform team, or is it the job of the leadership? Whose job it is, right? And then last pattern is that having no internal champions, right? So when you don't have an internal champions, so the challenge, the pushback, the resistance that you get is that we were involved in the design, so why should we trust it, right? You build something, must be great, but I don't know, right? I wasn't involved in it. So let's talk a little bit about the solutions. So as I'm talking through this, if there are some questions coming to your mind, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll address all of that. I don't want you to having to wait until everything is done to think about your questions. Feel free to put that in. So let's talk about some solutions on how we might actually address some of these resistance patterns that you saw. So I would take a 3-pronged approach to doing it. First thing, again, it's very simple, right? First thing is, diagnose problems. Have a diagnostic framework, diagnose a problem, then ensure that you have that platform as a product alignment. So this is key, right? Especially when we are talking about an organizational change. The huge, the empowering aspect of it is going to be that platform as a product mindset and alignment towards that. Then we'll talk about some recipes around frictionless adoption. So as you're really trying to address some of these resistance, what are the recipes? There's no real solution to it. It's mostly the recipes, the kind of things that you should try and do that will, make a difference in your world. So diagnostic framework is straightforward again. So this isn't rocket science. You go through and really sit down with the teams and understand the interactions. Then assess your platform capabilities. There are a lot of assessment frameworks that are available today. And in some cases, you might have to take the framework and make it internalized to your organization, but you can always do a really methodical analysis and understand the capabilities. then you can really understand what are your internal collaboration challenges, right? I mean, so that can also be unearthed using some patterns. Then you start mapping your structural and cultural challenges. And I'll show you how to do that. Once you start doing that, you are really starting to see some real blockers that is stopping in your context of what is happening. So how does this work? So these blockers can typically be in three different buckets. So think of it like a cultural bucket, structural bucket, or investment bucket, right? I mean, so in your cultural bucket, kind of things that you're thinking is that is platform a threat, right? Because there's a bunch of people who are calling themselves the automation engineers or a DevOps engineer, whatever they're calling themselves by. They are doing things for many years. When you come in with this platform mindset, am I losing control? And is that a threat? Then uh, when we're building solutions, are we building with that platform first mindset, right? I mean, so there is a bunch of things that goes into it, all the attributes of what an engineering platform should have. Some of those things could be a problem too. So to me, those are cultural issues. But you could also have a structural issue, right? For example, if your organization is set up in such a way that you have an engineering organization and an I&O organization, or infrastructure and operations organization, maybe your platform team is aligning under I&O organization. And then there is this friction between an engineering organization, the producer organization of the I&O, and the consumer organization of an engineering organization. So is there like a friction there, right? So there's structural challenges there. Um, in some cases, it might be a legitimate case of investment. Are you having the right investments? Are they perceived budget constraints? The reason I say perceived budget constraints is that everybody has a budget. It's a question of finding the right kind of priorities, right? To me, for perhaps call me biased, but there is no real better way to improve your engineering efficiency and get more out of what you're doing now, other than investing in some of these kinds of things. So obviously, you have to think about from the point of view of are there investment related challenges there. Once you do that, your solutions have to be more along the lines of, again, if you're cultural, it's more of a change resistance. So then you're really trying to start talking about how are you actually going to make sure that your incentives are aligned and then get the leadership support to do it. Similarly, in the structural side of things, maybe it is because of those organizational silos I was just talking about. In that case, understand what the team dependencies are. Because in some cases, I mean, there's no way you're really going to completely remove all the dependencies, right? How much ever empowerment that you bring to any team, there's always going to be some level of dependencies. But understanding those dependencies and ensuring that you augment those skill sets. Those skill sets in some cases might be that your development team might be sending a PR or an MR into a capability that might be actually being built by the platform team. Or in some cases, it might be like, no, it's none of that. You don't really want your development teams to be doing that. You want your development teams to be focusing on your product development. So the kind of skill sets that you need is to be able to use those, the interfaces at the level in which you're providing it. If there is an investment related challenge, you have to really start thinking about like, where is that investment going to go? I mean, you are already investing in tools and processes. Are these the right things? Is this really addressing the technical debt? Being able to be more quantitative and more objective about how you measure that would help a lot. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with team topologies. If you are definitely, if you haven't heard of it, or if you're not familiar with, I would strongly recommend that you look at teamtopologies.com. Essentially, what that tells you is that that whole framework, and there is a book and website and everything that goes along with it. What it really tells you is that what's the best way for your organization to be set up, aligned in such a way that it can actually help adoption of platforms, platform engineering mindsets and all that. So for again, if you're not quite familiar with the terms that's being used here, I strongly recommend that you actually take a look at teamtopologies.com. But think of your stream aligned teams on the left side as these product teams that are consuming things, and the platform team as the team producing it. But the idea is that if you have these enabling teams and a complicated subsystem team, these are standardized terms that you have there. These teams can help the whole process of ensuring adoption gets better. But as you do that, what you see on the right side is that a core function in this whole process is a platform product management role. I still talk to a lot of clients across every industry where they have a team of platform engineers building all kinds of capabilities. You still don't have a assigned platform product manager. Every time I talk about it, people think like, yeah, I know. I mean, we have a bunch of architects who know what they're doing and they're doing it. Nope, that isn't going to work. Again, it might work for you for a while, but then that'll come crashing down if you don't have that platform product management thinking. So I think making sure that you take the team topologies approach to doing this, but at the same time ensuring that your platform manager is a person who's sort of singularly responsible for it. It can be one person, it can be a team of people, however it works within your organization, but ensuring that the communication and the collaboration between each of these different parts of the overall team topologies model sort of works well. And this is where that cross collaboration between multiple stream-aligned teams, which are essentially your Scrum teams or your product teams, comes to the fore. I would also strongly recommend you to this particular assessment. If you could just go to teamtopologies.com and /TT assessment, you can actually find with this assessment, you should be able to do that, which would really tell you a lot about how your platform engineer, what's the level of maturity of your platform engineering? Is that where your problem is, or whether your problem is with your C-level buy-in or your architecture and all that. So this would really open up the doors for you to really see where the challenges are. So this is in assessment. I would urge you to take a look at it in your organization if you haven't already done it. Now let's talk a bit about from a solution point of view, right? So as you're really looking at the solution or the recipes I spoke about earlier, what you should be thinking about is that as part of building these recipes, you're going to be thinking about a few things. One is like, am I able to show the value? Right? If I'm doing something, it has to be value. So there has to be an objective way of providing the value. Subjective value measurements going to work, right? I mean, because you can really, if you need to convince somebody, you need to start with the data, start with the numbers. And if the numbers aren't there, that's not the whole story either, right? Because then you need to build your story around those numbers, but you need to show that value. And the benefits have to be localized, right? So you can't say that, hey, as an organization, we're going to actually ship things faster and we are actually going to make more money, or you're going to save money, things like that, right? That is great. That is not something that would resonate with each of the individual Scrum teams. So you have to localize those benefits. At some level, I would say that none of the adoption work will work if, adoption ideas would work if everything is top down and it's a mandate saying that, yeah, you should, CEO says that, oh, everybody should do X, Y, Z, right? That isn't going to work. But at the same time, when it comes to tooling, it's always good to have that level of support to be able to do that, because in these day and age, it's so difficult for us to keep things structured. So you need to have certain mandates around how things are done. That's where you need that leadership support. And like we spoke about a few times, measuring that progress is key. If you can't measure it, then you can't really make this work. And then embracing the product thinking and eventually making sure that this is done with that right kind of partnerships. So that is how we should really be approaching this. Now let's talk a little bit about the recipes that we have in ID, right? So the first pattern, resistance pattern we spoke about, is like this idea of brownfield inertia, right? I mean, so this is where we are really thinking about how do we actually address that. So to make this problem clear, if you have a set of people who are already working on a product and set of people who are really starting a new product, it's far more easier for you to get it working with a green field, right? The people who are starting new, because if you build the capabilities for them, they are actually going to come in and say, okay, yeah, this is going to make their job easier. They haven't done anything in the past, so they will use it. But brownfield is going to be far more difficult. So as you do this, 3-4 things that you should be thinking about. Number one is make sure that you co-create those golden paths, right? So don't create it for them and have provide it to them, but co-create with them. Understand, sit down with them and figure out and do that. Start with some of those non-critical systems, right? Because there's no point really going and mucking around with something that has been in play and bringing in like 80% of the revenues for their product line, right? So you obviously need to be focusing on non-critical systems. And then going back to the concept of team topologies we spoke about earlier, right? Pair with enabling teams so that there's an easier way for those brownfield teams to actually get things enabled. And if they have a real resistance coming from the point of view, if they don't have time to go look at it and all that, that becomes far more easier. And now there are a lot of Gen AI tools, that helps with that migration plan. If you have to move from one set of tools to the other, that whole process can be completely transparent. And then with the light level of abstraction that you have, that learning process also could be reduced. On the NIMBY effect side of things, right? I mean, so what do we do? So we can really start with running some kind of a platform product discovery workshop, right? I mean, so this would be again a collaborative activity, working with those teams to say, okay, this is how I'm actually going to be doing it. That out of that comes that pain points, right? I mean, through the DevEx scorecards and the tools that we could bring into that, you could say, okay, here are the main problems that I'm trying to solve, and then like set up those internal reference teams. So this would be like those champion showcases, right? So the champion saying that, hey, this is how I did it. This is the benefit I saw. So essentially, instead of you selling it, it is the people who are actually using it, the consumers themselves selling that whole process, right? And then with the some of the capabilities that we have, some newer tools that we are seeing in the agentic space, you can easily personalize some of those demand moments, right? The problems with a lot of the paid passes, that paid pass is usually for a set of people, a team or a group or something. What if you have like a personalized paid path? And I think that is far more easy to create today with the tools available. And to the resistance pattern of do it yourself, do it yourselves, or the siloed tooling side of things, offer plugin friendly APIs, right? Don't say that this is the only way to do it. You say I have a way of solving a problem and that's the only way to do it. Maybe not, right? Maybe the best solution for somebody for a particular capability is that they have built something. So essentially ensure that that API first way of doing things get the right kind of attention, and emphasize on that whole idea of, hey, I'm going to integrate things with what you're doing as opposed to replace the things that, because that is one of the biggest resistance that people have, right? Hey, I did something, I love it, I know it was working great, and it's a waste of time for me to go take somebody else's, and I don't want to throw away the stuff I've done. So you essentially address that concern that way. um, it's also good, and again, these days you can do these kinds of tracking with lots of very interesting tools without being very intrusive, right? So you can really track the time spent on maintaining this do-it-yourself pipelines as well as using the platform. Now, you should also do certain comparisons between internal tools and the platform baseline. So if a team is building some internal tools and figure out that there is a better way to do it using platform, be realistic about it. In some cases, you would find that the solution that you built as part of your platform might be inferior to the solution that is out there, and acknowledge that and accept that, and adopt it as part of your overall platform. And this is an easier problem to solve, creating that lack of visibility. But even though it's easier to solve, I still feel that a lot of the metrics and the visibility is still very dispersed across most organizations. They still don't have like a unified view of things. I'm sure you're familiar with tools like GetDX and Pharaohs, and there's a lot of tools out there, but there's significant amount of easy to use, well integrated tools that can actually help you create that visibility today. And my only recommendation is that you shouldn't really try and do it all by yourself, saying that, yeah, it's again a simple thing to do, let me go do it. Don't do it, because that is not something that you can keep up with unless it's your core of your business, right? But create so some visualizations around platform adoption, right? Whether it is onboarding, how much time it takes to get on a new capability, or it's an MTTR or deployment frequency, any of the kind of metrics that you identify from your end, that has to be tracked. And there has to be some level of instrumentation also done to ensure that these capabilities are available. This instrumentation, in this case, and what I'm talking about, is doing it to your platform capabilities themselves. And these dashboards can actually now start predicting a lot of the using AI, a lot of predictive features as to what might be actually happening. Then you can really start doing apply some generative capabilities, ensuring that you can start saying, oh, this is how it's going to work, and then make sure that you apply some of the agentic capabilities to ensure that it is doing what it's supposed to do. Missing product mindset, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. Uh, this is a non-negotiable in my book, right? Essentially, having a platform product manager is a non-negotiable activity. You have to have that, and then you need to start defining your personas, backlog, and roadmap, right? I mean, because personas is so important. How one capability is used by one persona. In this case, persona, what I mean is it might be a developer, it might be an SRE, it might be a QA, it might be a product manager, it might be a designer, it could be any of those people. In some cases, some capabilities might be actually targeted towards a leadership person or a management type person who needs to really see some analysis of things have been done. So ensuring that that understanding goes into defining your requirement and ensuring that that specification is aligned with that and the capabilities built at that level. And the biggest danger that we all have is that sometimes, especially for smaller organizations, it's very difficult to have internal teams treated as customers, right? We think of it like, yeah, I mean, this is like an internal customer. The internal customer, they would understand if I just throw something over the wall. No, let's not do it that way, because that is one of the root causes of all this friction that we see. So let's look at the ways in which you can interview and iterate and release through the process, just like you treat an external customer. And again, those creating the personas and the roadmap prompts and things like that have become far more important these days. You could even go into ChatGPT and do it, but there are far better models that you could use to tools and models and tools that you could use to actually do some of these activities today. Fragmented ownership, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. I think having those joint OKRs is super important, especially if you have your platform team aligned under a infrastructure and operations team or something like that. Having those leadership sort of aligned with their, the key results would be good. And then you should always consider creating a cross-functional platform governance build. This is true even for smaller organizations, right? I mean, so especially when you have that level of communication happening, the critical decisions with respect to what is actually getting built, how it is getting used, what kind of investments that has to happen, and where it has to come from, all those things will get clarified at that level. And then start having some team level liaisons, right? Essentially making sure that it's not really all formal. Make it as informal as possible to really build those relationships, right? And these things doesn't have to be like a set of project managers or somebody doing it. In my mind, it's essentially all the developers have to do it. So a part of a percentage of your platform engineers' responsibility should be, when you're setting up their goals and all that, should be to ensure that they actually are taking up that communication with the development teams, their consumer teams, and understanding what the clients do. So it's no different from you as a product developer understanding what your customers need, right? And there are lots of new tools. Again, I keep saying there are a lot of new tools that are coming up, and happy to recommend some of those things. That's going to help with this process. The other friction point that we had seen earlier was this internal champions, right? So essentially building that platform advocacy group is one thing that you have to do. We spoke about that governance team, similar to that, some level of an advocacy is important. And you should have at least one champion per line of business. Depending on the scale of your business, you might decide to do a lot more. But include these champions in the whole prioritization, the backlog process, and then obviously celebrate these with some internal case studies, just like the demos that we spoke about earlier. So to sort of conclude, right? I mean, some of the takeaways that you have here is like, there is like a 5-step process in this, right? I mean, so diagnose before you prescribe. We all know that, but that's super important here. Adopt a product mindset, and then make sure that design for frictionless adoption, right? I mean, so we saw some of those recipes. See how you could actually sort of, make those recipes a reality. Because in your case, you might be using certain tools. It might be a cultural issue. It might be a structural issue. Could be be a combination of that. But understand that and design that. Then ensure that you empower people and align those ownership. Because if everybody's an owner, or if you have the wrong owners, you're not really going to get the outcomes you need. Then again, as you are really going through the whole process of diagnosing this, you started generating some metrics, but ensure that what you're measuring is the impact, not the activity, right? I mean, we always talk about, right, outcomes over output, right? I mean, so we should really be thinking about the impact and how do we measure that impact. It makes a whole lot of difference. So if you want to continue the conversation, and I'm happy to spend some time on the Q&A here, but feel free to reach out to me. Also recently published a book that talks about a lot of these things in there, as well as building an engineering platform with a few of my esteemed colleagues. So feel free to check out this book too. This should give you a lot of insights and a lot of tools and methods and models that you could use to actually make your adoption journey better. So with that, back to you, Carla. Do we have any questions?
Perfect. Let's see. Let's give it a minute. Okay. I see we have one here. What metrics should leaders track to distinguish between a platform team that's creating real value versus one that's just created for the type for the hype? Sorry.
So I think the real question is that why would you even create some capabilities for hype? So that should not happen in this day and age, right? I mean, you should not pay anybody to create something for the hype. It should only be value based. So so this the QR code you see there, gives you access to the book that actually provides some models. If you look at IT Revolution, I'm sure you're all familiar with IT Revolution, and then go search for platform value model within IT Revolution, or just Google a platform value model. You'll find a paper I published a while back that actually gives you a clear way to measure uh, and look at the right kind of attributes to see, like, how do I actually look for what I'm building is valuable or not. So that's the way you should be looking at it. But I'm not entirely sure why we should really support, why anybody should support something for the hype. Maybe it is it's a marketing activity, right? If it is a marketing activity, then there is some value, marketing value that you can attribute to that. And those things are also mentioned in that paper if you are interested in that. But that's the way I would recommend you should try and do that.
Thank you. I have another question here. In your experience, what cultural signals show that an organization is truly ready to adopt a platform engineering mindset rather than just experiment with it?
I think the main thing to think about is that if you are a startup, if you are like a 20-person startup, you can have a mindset, but you may not be in a position to start investing in the right kind of things that's needed for um, sorry, let me actually keep sharing that if anybody wants to get there. So in that case, you probably would not want to be setting up a team. Instead, what you want to do is that you want to actually start thinking about the mindset. So what are these mindset activities? So it's pretty simple. So the first thing you should be thinking about is, like, am I building things with all the kind of things that we talk about from those key attributes? Like, am I building a more composable architecture? Am I creating a more loosely coupled architecture as I'm trying to do some of these things? Am I actually making things more observable by design? Am I actually creating things that are measurable by design? So I think there are maybe 5 to 7 different key platform attributes that you should be thinking about. But you shouldn't be going off and creating a platform team if you are having a startup. But beyond that, once you start getting one product out, even if you are a smaller company, especially if you're a smaller company, in a smaller organization building this, once you get one product out, it is the right time for you to really sort of codify that process of how you did that, and then invest in making sure that, yeah, this is my platform team or set of platform capabilities that's being done by maybe a part of your developers themselves, a part of the time of the developers themselves as you do that. But beyond that, there is no real restriction for you that says that, hey, you should stop thinking about this, this whole platform idea, or I have to wait until I'm the stall before I actually become a platform thinker. No, that thinking has to happen in your design time. I'm not talking about engineering platform design, right? I'm talking about when you design your software, when you architect your software, that's when you really start thinking about it. Because things like, loose coupling, high cohesion, things like that, these are things that we all have been like dealing with for 40, 50 years, right? I know that sometimes we still don't get it right, but when we really look at some of even the newer microservices based architectures, we find that there are lots of challenges with a lot of those things. So as you really start architecting things better early on, having the platform mindset would be good. Even when you bring in one tool, right? You bring in a third party tool to actually do something. Bring in that platform thinking along the way, meaning that am I actually going to integrate that tool into my ecosystem in a composable way, in a replaceable way? If you are not, then you are doing a huge disservice, right? Because you know that these tools are all ephemeral. At some point, they're going to go away, something better is going to come up. You're going to be best served if you're going to integrate that into your system in the most composable way. So that's how I would look at it.
Thank you. Another question. With AI becoming more prevalent, how do you see the role of platform engineering evolving in the next year? Will AI platform engineering just be the next hype?
A great question. So I've written a lot about it. I have a presentation coming up at PlatformCon that actually talks about it. So feel free to listen to that as an article coming up on Platform Engineering blog about it. So I would say there is significantly, I mean, we can all agree to the fact that there's significant hype when it comes to AI, right? In every field, including platform engineering. But AI is not replacing, to the best of my understanding, it cannot be replacing anything to do with platform engineering as we see it. But there is a huge opportunity for platform engineering to be able to do that. If you haven't looked at the work that is being done at the Canyon project, check out Canyon AI, you'll find some interesting ideas there. But think of it this way. Here's the simplest way of looking at it, right? When you go through the process of improving your developer experience, which you could say that, hey, that is the real reason why I'm actually using an engineering platform, right? Because my experience of my developers need to be improved. As I'm trying to do that, here's something to think about. You diagnose the problem, you say, here's a solution, then you implement that solution, you see the improvement, right? That's a cycle. The place where you have the biggest problem or the biggest challenge of the friction is to implement that solution, because that's the most time consuming. And that is the part that you would see all this friction that we talk about and everything would come in. What if you were to be able to actually make that process far more efficient? What you are able to make some autonomous agents go make that happen, right? So think of it like you diagnose a problem where saying that my PR merge time is too high. So, okay, so I got some metrics saying, okay, this is how bad it is. I need to improve that. Currently, the median time is like 3 days or whatever, right? And now I need to actually make that 3 hours. So, yeah, you're saying that I'm not going to actually replicate my developer. I'm not going to create more developers to be able to do that. How do I do that in a more efficient way? What if we can have an agentic approach to PR merge that would do 90% of the things that developers would do and leave only the 10% to the developers, which would make it far more efficient. So to me, the real benefit of AI is to sort of improve everything along the way. Now, another thing that you should be doing is, even from a metrics point of view, can I actually try and see if there is a way to measure those things, measure everything that I need to measure in a better way? And as I mentioned, one thing I really see in the industry across every different industry verticals is when people try and measure things, when they say, everybody says they're measuring something, right? But you're still not getting the outcome. Why is that? Because there's still disparate set of tools and systems and everything happening, right? If you look at your overall enterprise architecture, you find that, okay, you have your your product-based solutions and your third-party integrations and some of your authentication systems and your ServiceNow and your Salesforce and everything in like so many different pieces. Now everything needs to come together, needs to be well orchestrated, and needs to work as one piece, and then have to really get the right kind of data extracted out of it. That's another area where you can have some of these agents do a better job. So AI is a reality as to how it will work. It'll only make the whole process of platform engineering far more interesting and efficient as we move ahead.
Thank you. Here we have a question. How can I encourage my team and PO to work more on DevEx rather than just delivery? Should we plan to move from the Snow, I think it's ServiceNow portal, to the self-managed web portal for developers?
I think that's a great idea. But I would also say that it is more of a mindset change, right? And mindset change has got so many different aspects to it. It is not just a portal or like a view, right? It's about how much democratizing that you're doing with that view. If that data that your PO is looking at or your team is looking at is consistent with the data that everybody, your end users and your consumers and your leadership is all looking at, then that makes a huge difference. So sometimes, I mean, things like ServiceNow is like it's amazing, right? I mean, it can do 100 different things, right? Now, the question is that the right tool for you to actually create the right level of visibility? I would go out on a limb and say that no, it is not, right? Because there are so many different tools that are out there that can essentially think of it like your SEI, right? You're all familiar with SEI, the software engineering intelligence tools. Look at your SEI tools, ensuring that SEI activities are tracked the right way. And if you have that, then it becomes like your idea is to look at those outcomes than the outputs, right? Because if your PO is really looking at delivery, to me, that is more of an output thing. Your your goal should be to look at the outcomes. How do you get the outcomes? So typically when you look at these kinds of data, you have to look at it across multiple axes, which is like I always like this idea of end-to-end observability, right? If you again have if you have interest in learning more about it, just do a Google on end-to-end observability with my name on it, and you can find some great, interesting deep dives on that one. Um, you should, when you're really doing even some level of observability, you're not really looking at things like your application observability or your infrastructure observability or service level of observability. You're really looking at everything tied into your business outcomes. And some of these SEI tools are essentially doing that. It is connecting the dots across the whole ecosystem. And that makes a huge difference, again, all the way up to your business outcomes. And once you start doing that, it becomes far more easier for your product owner or your team to really look at it at that level, as opposed to just saying that, hey, I saw something that I had to deliver on something for the sprint. I did that. I'm good. And I'm doing great. No, you're not, unless you're actually creating those outcomes. But yeah, I think one of the solutions might be using the right kind of SEI tools, but it's also that cultural change that you have to bring about.
Perfect. Thanks. One last question. What's the most surprising aspect of the evolution of platform engineering in your opinion? Or in other words, what didn't you see coming?
I think, the if you ask me, and I think when platform orchestrators first started coming about as a product, that was interesting because until then, we are still doing some level of orchestration, right? I mean, from the beginning of time, we've been doing that. But having a way to communicate with an orchestrator using some YAML-like controls and things like that, that was something that was really interesting. But to me, if you ask me what's the most surprising part of it, uh, it's always been about codifying and making sure that there is a science and art behind all of this. And that is something that we can clearly define and measure. And that has been the game changer in the whole process. As you really think through this, there's so much of parallels between domain-driven design and platform engineering. So again, if you are interested, we have like multiple chapters in the book that talks about how do you actually look at the domains within engineering platform? What's the approach that you should take? So the kind of parallels that you could map between how we have been building software for, I don't know, at least for the last 40, 50 years, and how some of the latest advances in platform engineers have come about. That has been somewhat of a surprising aspect because this is all driven by the work done by Gene Kim and Nicole and all the people who have actually been doing a lot of blazing the trail within this whole platform, and Just Humble and people like that who has been doing some really amazing work in that space. But those things have been truly eye-opening. But in the end of the day, it's about the parallels between how software is being developed, or we have been developing software for all these years, and how engineering platform is done, and how could we actually formalize a lot of these things using the orchestration platforms.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's it for today. We ran out of time. So thank you so much, Ajay, for your great presentation and everyone who joined. If we missed any of your questions, guys, you just share them in the Platform Engineering Slack. And yeah, have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.